At his own son's birthday, the billionaire's glamorous wife walked in with a gun and aimed it at the children. Wait, let me tell you how it all started. That Christmas Eve, snowflakes drifted down in silent sheets, decorating the sprawling Hayworth estate like something out of a cold fairy tale. But inside, there was no peace, no joy, no laughter. The grand marble halls echoed not with Christmas carols or celebration, but with the tortured cries of a small boy whose voice carried through every wing of the mansion. Julian Hayworth, 6 years old, fragile, deaf since birth. The only son of billionaire tycoon Adrian Hayworth, a man whose word ruled over boardrooms like a monarch ruling a broken kingdom. His money could buy almost anything: a chain of private hospitals, an entire fleet of jets, the most expensive wines, the fastest cars. But what it could not buy was silence in his own home. Julian cried endlessly each night, a scream more painful to his father's ears than any lawsuit or stock market crash. A cry that no specialist, no therapist, no doctor had explained. And so Adrian's vast mansion felt less like a castle and more like a haunted house, cursed by a sound that would not stop. "Why won't he stop?" Sienna hissed, her sharp voice cutting the still night. She was Adrian's second wife, porcelain beautiful but cold as ice, glamorous in her glittering gown. Her patience wore thinner each hour the cries echoed in her ears. "We've tried everything, the private doctors, the best tutors, endless therapies, and still, he screams like an animal. Adrian, I cannot live like this forever." Adrian ran his hand down his tired face. Behind his steel-gray eyes lived exhaustion, guilt, and something heavier, a sorrow that only he carried. He glanced at the portrait above the massive fireplace. Evelyn, his first wife, Julian's mother, or rather, the woman the world believed was long dead. Lifting a crystal glass, he swallowed another drink, though it burned him alive. "He's just a boy. Our boy. He needs help, not anger." But Julian screamed again upstairs, the cry so piercing it robbed Adrian of his words. It was a wound with no bandage, a scar that refused to close. And on this Christmas Eve, as snow piled at the gates of their estate, a miracle would walk through the door in the smallest, quietest gesture of all. Outside, Nora Kensington pulled her thin coat tightly around her little girl. Clara was only 5, but her spirit burned bright even against the cold. They had come only because Nora's sister worked as part of the hired cleaning staff for the Hayworth estate, and extra help was needed for the holiday banquet. Nora, a single mother struggling to pay rent, had said yes without thinking. Clara tugged on her mother's hand as the front doors opened, giant chandeliers pouring golden light on them. "Mommy, it's so big. Bigger than the library. Bigger than church. Who lives here?" Nora bent down, eyes soft. "A lot of very rich, very busy people. We don't belong here, Clara. We're just here to help my sister. Stay close and be quiet." But Clara was not one to simply fade into the background. Curiosity flitted across her clever eyes as she wandered further, dragging her mother past velvet staircases and servants carrying silver trays. That was when she heard it. The cry. A sound so raw, so heartbreaking, it stopped Clara instantly. She tightened her tiny hand on her mother's. "Who's crying like that?" she asked, her voice small. Nora shook her head nervously. "It's none of our." But Clara pulled harder, following the cries to an enormous set of double doors. As a pair of maids rushed out in defeat, Clara slipped past them without permission. Nora gasped, chasing after her daughter. Inside, curled up in a king-sized bed of silk, was Julian Hayworth. His blonde hair clung to his wet cheeks. His fists dug furiously at the sheets as he screamed soundlessly to himself. Though deaf, his cries came in guttural waves that shook the room. Everyone who had tried to comfort him, the finest professionals money could buy, had failed. But Clara, a little girl with no pedigree, no fortune, no training, simply walked forward. She climbed onto the bed beside him, and to everyone's shock, she reached out her hand. Her small fingers traced a shape in the air. One simple sign. Julian froze. His tears stopped mid-scream. His chest, once trembling, grew still. His wide, wet eyes blinked up at the girl, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he gave a broken, fragile smile. Silence. The room fell still. Nora, Adrian, Sienna, everyone in the mansion was stunned. The billionaire's deaf son was finally quiet. Adrian stepped forward, his powerful frame suddenly weak, his heart racing like a man who had seen a ghost. What did she just do? But Sienna's reaction was different. Her painted lips twisted into something sharp, her eyes narrowing on Clara. Rage, yes. But beneath it, fear. A fear so deep it was as though Clara had reached into a grave and pulled out a secret no one was supposed to know. Clara, baffled by the tension, looked up innocently. "I just said Mommy loves you," she explained softly. "I don't know why he knew it." Nora froze. Adrian staggered back. And Sienna, her face drained of color. Because the phrase Clara signed was Evelyn's private lullaby to Julian, a gesture only his real mother ever used. A mother the world thought had been long dead. The billionaire's empire shook on its foundation that night, not from a hostile takeover or market collapse, but from the tiny hands of a little girl revealing the first crack in a fortress of lies. And far above them all, the portrait of Evelyn seemed to watch, her painted eyes glimmering in the firelight, as though waiting for the night the truth would claw its way back into the light. That was just the beginning, and the Hayworth family was about to shatter. And before we continue this journey, I have to thank each of you watching right now. If the suspense in this story has already grabbed you, hit that like button so I know you're hooked. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because the next part of Julian's story is only going to grow darker, deeper, and more shocking. And trust me, you won't want to miss the secrets waiting next. Clara's innocent gesture has exposed something Sienna desperately wanted buried forever. Why does she seem terrified? How could a poor little girl know Evelyn's secret sign? And what truth about the dead first wife lies hidden in this mansion? The night after Clara's strange gesture, the Hayworth mansion could no longer pretend to be made of stone and glass. It had become a cage of questions. Julian was quiet for the first time in months, clinging to Clara as though she had always belonged beside him. That silence should have been a gift. Instead, it was unbearable, like looking at a still ocean and knowing a storm surged beneath. Nora tried to usher Clara away, murmuring apologies to Adrian, but the billionaire raised a hand. His authority silenced rooms, but now his voice cracked like a man begging. "Please, stay. My son hasn't smiled in years, and she did what no one else could." Clara sat on the thick rug, building a tower of blocks with Julian. Every so often she signed another familiar motion, and he watched her with wide eyes, laughing soundlessly. The laughter echoed louder in Adrian's soul than any investor's praise had. But in the corner of the room, Sienna watched, poised like a venomous statue in designer heels. Her voice hissed low, "Adrian, you cannot just invite strangers into this home. People talk. Your son is vulnerable. What if word spreads?" But word was already spreading. Servants whispered in the halls that perhaps Julian wasn't broken at all. He was waiting to be understood. That maybe the new Mrs. Hayworth hadn't tried as hard to reach him as she claimed. The rumor ran like fire. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the grand chandelier dimmed, Nora tucked Clara's coat around her small body. "We don't belong here," she whispered. "These people are powerful and dangerous. We should be grateful for the extra work and go back to our life." But before they could leave, Adrian himself appeared at the door. The storm in his eyes was gone, replaced with a man who looked desperate. "I want you to stay. For Julian. For me. I'll pay anything you ask." Nora's pride fought against the temptation. But then she looked back and saw Clara's tiny hand cupped inside Julian's, the boy sleeping peacefully at last. For the first time in years, peace had returned. Could she tear that away? "Just until he's stronger," Adrian added quickly. He feels safe with her. Please. And so the poor woman and her child stepped deeper into the glittering cage, unaware that the walls weren't made of marble. They were built of secrets. The following days brought unease. Clara's laughter filled Julian's wing like sunshine, but Sienna's heels clicked angrily through the hallways. She hovered in doorways, her beauty-masking eyes filled with rage. When no one was watching, she leaned down to hiss in Julian's ear, forgetting all too often that deaf children can feel the weight of hate even without hearing it. His small body stiffened whenever she entered. One afternoon, while Nora folded expensive linens in a guest room, Clara burst in laughing with Julian. They carried blocks and marbles, sharing signs back and forth. To Nora's shock, Clara moved her hands quickly, signs more advanced than she had ever been taught. "Where did you learn that?" Nora asked. Clara's face was puzzled. "Julian showed me. He says his real mommy taught him long ago. He still remembers." Nora froze. Real mommy. She realized too late that the door behind her was open. Adrian stood there, pale, trembling at the words. His gaze lingered on Nora as though she had poisoned the air with them. "What did she say?" "She meant nothing," Nora said quickly, motioning Clara to hush. "Children, they say things." But Clara, innocent as only a child could be, added cheerfully, "Julian said his real mommy isn't up in heaven, she's locked away. He told me she cries too, just like him." Adrian's hand shook on the doorframe. His voice grew sharp as glass. "Enough. Take her out." 4 hours that night, the billionaire sat alone in his cold study, the fire dying low, Evelyn's portrait blazing above him like fire judging water. Sienna entered quietly, a glass of wine in her manicured hand. "Don't tell me you believe that child. Evelyn is dead, Adrian. Long gone. Stop holding on." But Adrian didn't answer. He stared instead at Evelyn's painted smile, remembering the letters, the silence after her supposed illness, the funeral he never saw for himself. Doubt, poisonous as rot, burrowed inside him. And far away in her wing of the mansion, Clara whispered to Julian as they built castles of blocks, "Don't worry, I'll help find your mommy." Julian's eyes glowed with hope, though he'd never spoken a word his father could hear. The mansion crackled with whispers now, not of Christmas bells or fortune, but of a child's innocent words pointing toward a secret buried beneath gilded lies. The truth was stirring in corridors that had gone silent for years. And the woman wearing Adrian's ring knew the walls of her empire were beginning to crumble. If your heart just skipped a beat, imagine the storm about to come. Leave a comment below with what you think Clara meant by "mommy is locked away." Could Evelyn still be alive, or is this all the imagination of a child? And remember, subscribe right now because now, the whispers in the mansion can turn into something that could shatter the entire Hayworth dynasty. Adrian has heard a devastating claim from Clara. Evelyn, the love of his past and Julian's first mother, may not be dead after all. But is this the rambling of children? Or is there truly a prisoner hidden within his empire? The Hayworth mansion, once so cold and orderly, now pulsed with unease. Servants walked with lowered heads. Sienna snapped harsher commands, hiding her fear under bitterness. And Adrian Hayworth, powerful, ruthless billionaire, was no longer steady in his empire. He was haunted. Haunted not by losses in the stock market, not by scandals whispered in glossy magazines, but by the ghost of his first wife. Evelyn. The woman buried in memory, framed above the fireplace, draped in whispers. The words Clara had spoken, innocent, yet cutting like a dagger, whirled through his mind relentlessly. His real mommy is locked away. The following morning, the mansion was brighter. Yet beneath the glistening chandeliers, the truth weighed like an anchor. Adrian excused himself from a business call, ignoring screaming phones and aggravated partners. Instead, he found himself climbing the old staircase, feet dragging like a man walking toward his fate. He reached Evelyn's portrait. Her painted eyes bore into him, soft yet unyielding, as though silently accusing him of betrayal. He touched the frame, whispering under his breath, "If you're truly gone, why does my son still see you in his dreams?" "Because grief lies to children." Sienna's voice cut him. She stood behind him, a silk robe cascading like a queen's armor. She tilted her head, her gaze cold as she advanced. "Clara is filling Julian's head with fantasies. And you're drowning in guilt you've refused to heal from. Admit it, Adrian. Evelyn is dead. I loved you when she couldn't. When she failed you." Adrian's jaw tightened. His fists curled, veins visible against his skin. He had built empires on instinct, and the same instinct screamed now. Sienna's words carried weight, but not truth. He turned sharply. "Evelyn was banished from my world before she even had a chance to explain herself. And you do well to remember, Sienna. This house isn't yours to rule." Her smile froze, but behind her painted lips brewed fury. Meanwhile, in the sunlit playroom, Clara signed gentle words to Julian. Nora sat nearby, sewing a torn doll's dress, her ears straining to catch pieces of their unusual conversation. Clara's fingers moved effortlessly. "Your mommy told you that," she whispered. Julian nodded, forming cautious signs with his tiny hands. Clara frowned. "But why would she be locked in a room? Why doesn't Daddy help her?" Before Julian could answer, the nanny walked in, face pale from overhearing. She glanced nervously around and whispered to Nora when Clara and Julian weren't looking. "Child shouldn't be saying such things. Best pretend it never happened. People get dismissed in this house when they talk too much." Then, as if struck by lightning, she hurried out, leaving an echo of fear. Dismissed. Everyone in the Hayworth mansion knew it wasn't just a polite word for firing. Staff who whispered Evelyn's name hadn't just left their jobs, they had vanished from sight altogether, envelopes of hush money fattening their silence. That night, Nora followed a trail of curiosity she wished she could ignore. The mansion's west wing, the one always shrouded in shadows, creaked beneath her hesitant steps. She carried only the dim light of an antique lantern borrowed from the kitchen. Marble floors gave way to dusty carpets. Cobwebs stretched across doors seldom opened. She counted doors. 1, 2, 3, until she reached one sealed tight. Unlike the others, its handle was rusted, its wood scarred as if someone tried to open it, or escape from within. Nora's throat tightened. She pressed her hand to the wood. The cold practically screamed secrets. And then, she heard it. The faintest sound. Not a cry. Not movement. But a shiver, almost like humming. The kind of lullaby a mother would hum to her baby. Her knees weakened. She staggered back, trembling in disbelief. The humming stopped. Silence pressed heavy. Suddenly, "Looking for something?" Sienna's voice sliced like a blade behind her. Nora gasped, spinning around. Sienna stood, adorned in jewels though it was late, her wrist heavy with diamonds. Clara left her toy upstairs," Nora stammered. Sienna smirked, stepping closer. "Stay out of the West Wing. This is my home, not yours. I've been patient with your daughter, but you," she leaned in, her whisper sharp, "you're trespassing in rooms that will burn you alive if you're not careful." Nora nodded quickly, rushing away, but her heart raced. Her mind screamed one truth. That sound was no imagination. A lullaby hummed in the dark. And inside his study, Adrian sat sleepless, piecing torn fragments of memory. The whispers. The stories that never matched. The sealed wing he never dared to open. Suddenly, the business meetings didn't matter. Something inside him had cracked. When dawn crept through the windows, he rose and whispered to his own reflection in the glass, "If Evelyn lives, then I've been living a lie." In that moment, the man who had built billion-dollar towers began to crumble. Not from market crashes or hostile takeovers, but from love, secrets, and betrayal hidden in the heart of his own home. This story is only beginning to unravel. Do you feel the weight of Evelyn's presence? If you think Nora really heard something behind that sealed door, type Truth will rise in the comments, so I know you're following the mystery. Hit that subscribe button because what's hidden behind locked doors won't stay in the shadows for long. And a single New Year's Eve party is about to explode with betrayal. Nora has heard a mother's lullaby where only silence should exist. But who dared to hum it inside the sealed West Wing? And how has Sienna managed to guard the mansion's darkest secret for so long? December 31st arrived with fireworks booming across the city skyline. The Hayworth estate glimmered as the elite of society flooded through its towering doors. Politicians, CEOs, socialites in gowns that shimmered like liquid silver. A string orchestra sent soft music dancing through the air. Wealth, power, and beauty shined everywhere. But in the deepest recesses of Adrian Hayworth's chest, no celebration stirred. For days, the whispers in his mansion had crushed him more than any market loss ever could. Evelyn's memory wrapped around his heart like a phantom hand. And Clara's innocent words were needles. Julian, dressed in a tiny velvet suit, stayed close to Clara, whose bright eyes watered with excitement at the sight of glittering gowns and fireworks lighting the windows. But her happiness dimmed every time she caught Adrian's stepwife glaring, teeth clenched behind a forced socialite smile. At one point in the evening, Clara tugged at Nora's sleeve. Julian says Mommy used to hum that song Daddy plays on the piano, but he says he doesn't hear it anymore. Nora froze, catching the girl's meaning. Another memory too precise to ignore. Adrian sat across the room, nursing a drink he hadn't touched. Guests greeted him like royalty, yet his steel gaze locked only on one woman, not on Sienna, who fluttered about hosting, but on Nora. Not because she adorned herself in jewels or silk. In fact, her borrowed dress was far too plain among all this opulence. But because she looked at his son with a warmth no one else dared, and it reminded him of a gentler life. A life Evelyn had once given him. The orchestra rose in swelling triumph. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Champagne flutes raised. Guests cheered. And at 1, the mansion erupted in applause. Fireworks exploded in color across the windows. Adrian did not kiss his wife. Instead, as Sienna leaned toward him, he turned his head, leaving her lips to brush the air. Gasps rose around them. Sienna's jaw clenched. The firework explosions outside sounded like war in her ears. Hours later, after guests stumbled home and the laughter faded, silence returned. But vengeance simmered heavily in Sienna's veins. She walked the halls like a blade without a sheath. Her heels clicked into the servants' wing, where a maid waited nervously with a small bundle of cash. Nora, silently passing by, froze in the shadows as she watched the scene. Sienna shoved the money into the young woman's hands. You didn't see her. You didn't hear her. Do you understand? If the word Evelyn slips from your tongue again, I'll make sure you disappear just like the rest. The maid nodded in terror and fled. Nora's stomach churned. The whispers were not whispers. They were bought, silenced, buried in money and threats. That night, unable to sleep, Clara wandered toward the West Wing again, Julian padding along beside her. Show me where, she urged him softly. The boy's small hand pointed at a shuttered door, dust thick as sorrow on the frame. Clara gasped. Through the crack in the door, just for a moment, small hands still forming words, she swore she saw movement. Like pale fingers brushing against the curtain of the window. A shadow gliding in the dark. Clara's heart pounded as she whispered, Julian, I think I saw your mommy. Julian signed desperately, eyes glowing with hope. But before Clara could speak again, Adrian himself appeared at the end of the corridor, drawn by footsteps. What are you two doing here at midnight? His voice thundered across the hallway. The children froze. Nora rushed forward, stammering excuses. But Adrian's view snagged on something else. Lying on the floor near the sealed door was a single folded piece of paper. He crouched, trembling as he picked it up. The ink was fresh, the handwriting achingly familiar. 3 words. Help me, Adrian. The paper shook in his hands as his vision blurred. He hadn't seen those strokes of handwriting in nearly 7 years. Evelyn's hand. Evelyn's plea. From behind him, Sienna's voice pierced through the silence like icy steel. "What exactly are you holding?" Adrian clenched the note, his mind and heart roaring. He knew then, his empire had been built on a lie. And somewhere, Evelyn was alive. Do you feel the ground shifting beneath you? Type Evelyn Lives in the comments if you believe Adrian just discovered the beginning of the truth. Smash that like button if the fireworks of betrayal shook you tonight. And don't leave without subscribing, because the story explodes inside the hospital, and secrets buried in silence rise like fire. Adrian has found Evelyn's handwriting, alive, desperate, waiting. And now Sienna knows he may be turning against her. But the boys' seizures are about to drag all of them to the hospital, where a nurse from the past will confirm what no billionaire wants to face. New Year's Day was supposed to be a morning of glittering headlines and celebratory press releases about the Hayworth empire. Instead, it opened with panic. Julian collapsed. It happened without warning, his small body seizing violently in the playroom while Clara screamed for help. His head jerked, his lips turning pale. Adrian sprinted through the halls faster than any chauffeur-driven luxury car could have delivered him. Nora, clutching Julian's trembling hand, shouted, "We need an ambulance!" The mansion staff froze until Adrian's booming order broke them like glass. Now! Minutes later, through bitter January winds, flashing red lights cut the snow as paramedics rushed the heir of Hayworth Holdings into a sleek private hospital owned by Adrian's own portfolio. Yet here, money couldn't stop the machines shrieking or the doctors whispering. Julian lay pale, hooked up to wires and monitors, his tiny chest rising and falling unevenly. Clara gripped the edge of his blanket like she could steal some of his pain if she held tight enough. As doctors stormed in and out, Adrian pressed his head into his hands, the billionaire mask stripped away, revealing only a broken father. Whispering to no one, he said, "Evelyn, if you're out there, forgive me. I let him suffer because I was blind." It was then that an older nurse approached Nora at the edge of the ward. The woman's face drained of color the moment she laid eyes on Julian. Her voice shook. "That boy. I know that face." Nora frowned, alarmed. "You've met him before?" The nurse's eyes flicked toward Adrian, then to Nora again, as though measuring the danger of her words. Finally, in a hushed tone, "Years ago, in the psychiatric wing, a young woman was hidden away in a private ward meant for no one to see. She used to sing. Well, not sing, but hum lullabies, and she carried a necklace she swore would one day belong to her son. That boy on that bed. He looks exactly like her. Exactly." Nora's skin prickled, every hair on her arms standing tall. "Who was she?" The nurse whispered a name that nearly stopped Nora's heart. "Evelyn Hayworth." At that exact moment, the door burst open, Sienna sweeping in with heels clicking like judgment, her dress immaculate as though she had stepped out of a fashion ad instead of a hospital. She spotted the nurse leaning close to Nora. "What exactly are you whispering about?" Sienna's voice was as sharp as broken glass. The nurse jolted back, muttered something about medicine, and scurried away. But Sienna's eyes narrowed, zeroing in on Nora like prey caught too close to the hunter's teeth. She leaned in, her perfume suffocating, and hissed in Nora's ear so only she could hear. "You tread deeper into waters that will drown you. Stay in your lane, or I'll bury your daughter the way I buried Evelyn." Nora stiffened, her breath caught. Sienna straightened, her public smile refixed, as though nothing at all had passed between them. Later that evening, after hours of tense waiting, Adrian returned to Julian's bedside. His son stirred weakly, fingers twitching under the blanket. And then, he pulled something from beneath his pillow. Small. Silver. A locket. Adrian froze. His heart stopped like a man hit with lightning. That locket wasn't just random jewelry. It was the same necklace Evelyn had worn every day of their marriage, the one he buried in her coffin when she died. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside lay a tiny folded note, child-scrawled, but clear enough to break the billionaire's chest down the middle. In shaky letters it read, "Mommy gave this to me. Don't tell the lady." Julian had been hiding it, protecting it, because somewhere, somehow, His real mother had pressed that necklace into his tiny palm. Adrian staggered back, dizzy. The room spun. Evelyn wasn't only alive, she had reached him. She was close enough to touch his son. Close enough that his deaf, fragile child trusted her above the glimmering strangers filling his life. But standing by the doorway was Sienna, watching Adrian cradle the necklace like it was gold. Watching him crumble. And in her eyes was something darker than fear. It was survival, rage, and the promise that she would not go down quietly. Do you feel the chill of this revelation? Type "The truth can't be hidden" in the comments if Evelyn's necklace gave you goosebumps. Smash that like button if your heart just cracked open with Adrian's realization, and subscribe, because the courtroom becomes a battlefield where Clara's innocent testimony could blow Sienna's empire apart. Julian has carried his mother's necklace hidden all along, and now Adrian has undeniable proof Evelyn is alive. But Sienna won't stand still as her lies collapse. Next stop, the courtroom, where the world will hear a deaf boy's truth through the voice of an innocent little girl. The world outside thought the Hayworths were untouchable. But today, their legacy was dragged into a courtroom packed with lawyers, reporters, whispering spectators, and too many enemies waiting for blood. Adrian Hayworth entered first, suit pressed sharp as steel, but his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Nora walked behind him with Clara squeezing her hand, her bravery glowing despite her small frame. Sienna arrived moments later, her ivory suit gleaming like armor, pearl earrings swinging as she stalked down the aisle without so much as a glance at her husband. The case was meant to be simple in public terms, a custody hearing over Julian's care. But everyone in the room sensed the deeper storm. This hearing wasn't about a boy's guardianship. It was about truth, lies, money, and the possible resurrection of a woman long believed dead. Julian sat quietly with a court-appointed child advocate, his small hands fiddling with a toy car. He looked calm, but his eyes never left Clara. She gave him a tiny smile and wiggled her fingers in their private sign. He beamed silently. He trusted her more than anyone in the room. Judge Harrington, broad and gray-browed, pounded his gavel. Order in this court. Let us proceed. Adrian's lawyer rose first. Your Honor, we're here because the boy's stepmother, Mrs. Sienna Hayworth, has willfully neglected and emotionally endangered Julian. Evidence will show this child has suffered under her care. We will also introduce testimony pointing to an astounding revelation that calls into question the circumstances of his birth and his mother's alleged death. A ripple shot through the courtroom. Cameras clicked. Sienna's lawyer snapped up like a hound. Objection! Wild accusations and baseless fantasies. Evelyn Hayworth was declared deceased by certified documents years ago. These delusions. Silence, the judge thundered. The proceedings ground on with adults tossing accusations like daggers. Witnesses spoke about shrill yelling in the mansion, about bruised staff reputations, about hush money envelopes. But none of it struck the room as deeply as what came next. When called to the stand, Clara Kensington skipped forward nervously. Her feet barely touched the floor from the big wooden chair. The solemn oath was given, though she needed help repeating it in her sweet, shaky voice. The lawyer crouched so he was at her eye level. Clara, can you tell us how you communicate with Julian? She nodded brightly. With my hands. He showed me signs, and I showed him too. He taught me his secret messages. And what did he tell you in these messages? Clara hesitated a moment. Then, with childlike sincerity, he said his real mommy wasn't gone. He said she still talks to him sometimes. He told me she's not in heaven. The courtroom exploded in noise. Gasps, reporters scribbling furiously, cameras flashing like fireworks. The judge hammered his gavel so hard the table rattled. Order! Order! But Clara wasn't done. She leaned forward and whispered into the microphone, her 5-year-old voice carrying across the silent chamber. Julian said his mommy is locked away. Adrian's chest crumpled, his hands trembling against the table. The necklace still weighted his pocket, burning like hot iron. Sienna was on her feet, face red, spitting venom through clenched teeth. This is outrageous. A child's imagination, nothing more. We cannot allow fantasies from a little girl to tarnish. But before she could finish, Judge Harrington raised a hand. "Sit down, Mrs. Hayworth. This testimony will be heard." Tension crackled like a live wire. Nora's eyes brimmed with tears. Clara swung her legs nervously, unaware she had just cracked open the first real hole in Sienna's fortress. And just as silence threatened to return, the heavy oak doors of the courtroom creaked open. Heads turned. Reporters gasped. A woman in a black veil appeared, moving slowly down the aisle. Her steps were uncertain, weak, but each one landed like thunder through Adrian's chest. The judge squinted in confusion. "And you are?" The woman lifted her veil. Gasps shook the chamber. It was Evelyn Hayworth. Her face was thinner, her eyes more hollow than the portrait, but unmistakable. Alive. Breathing. Scarred by years of silence, but present before them all. Adrian froze. His heart stopped. His soul collided with the sight he'd buried long ago. The whispers of his child, the locket, the note. It wasn't madness. Evelyn was alive. If your jaw just dropped, smash that like button and leave "Evelyn Returns" in the comments so I know you're as stunned as Adrian. And if you haven't already, subscribe right now because Evelyn finally speaks. And the story she tells will reveal the darkest betrayal yet, flooding the Hayworth dynasty with shame and secrets blacker than sin itself. The courtroom shook as Evelyn Hayworth, once declared dead, revealed herself in front of the world. But what story does she carry? And how deep do the lies run through this billionaire's web of marriage, money, and power? The courtroom no longer buzzed, it roared. The sound was shock, disbelief, whispers crashing against the walls like a tidal wave. Evelyn Hayworth stood at the center of it, her veil lowered, pale face trembling but fiercely alive. Adrian rose from his seat as if pulled by invisible strings. Every muscle, every nerve carried equal doses of grief and hope. His lips quivered with a single breath. "Evelyn." It was part prayer, part confession. The judge pounded his gavel. "Order! Order! Who is this woman?" "It's her," reporters whispered furiously, shoving forward cameras. "Evelyn. The dead wife." Evelyn's hollow voice cut across the chamber. "I am Evelyn Grace Hayworth, once wife to Adrian, mother to Julian. Buried in rumor, declared dead on paper. But tonight I rise only to tell the truth." Mouths gaped open. Some spectators wept without knowing why. The chilling weight of her broken figure was that powerful. Adrian's knees weakened. Sienna sat stone still, her face a mask. But beneath her flawless makeup her eyes darted like a wild animal sensing the hunt had turned against her. The judge's voice cracked with disbelief. "Mrs. Hayworth, if you are who you claim, then where have you been these years?" Evelyn stepped forward, her frail frame shaking as she held the bench for balance. Her hands twitched, a habit Adrian remembered too well from nights she read poetry by candlelight. "Locked away," Evelyn whispered. "Erased by her." Her shaking finger pointed across the room like a blade. Straight at Sienna. Gasps rippled. Sienna stood abruptly, hands outstretched, a performance ready. "Lies. She's a fraud. A ghost dragged from shadows to destroy my marriage, my reputation." "Enough." Evelyn's sudden cry silenced everyone. Her voice wasn't strong, but it carried the weight of years stolen. Tears shimmered in Evelyn's eyes as she told her story. "When I gave birth to Julian, I was weak, joyful but sick. And in those days, Sienna entered like a friend, a helper. She whispered to Adrian that I was unwell, that my mind was breaking. She told the doctors I hallucinated, that I was unfit to raise my own son. She forged papers with her family's influence. They made me a prisoner in a private hospital wing. Years I spent behind those locked doors, humming lullabies to a child who needed me, while the world buried me alive under Sienna's lies." The courtroom filled with sobs from strangers who couldn't help but cry. Clara clung to Nora's arm, her small voice whispering, "See, Mommy? I told you Julian's mommy was still here." Evelyn turned to Adrian. "I wrote you letters. So many. But she intercepted them. She told me you'd abandoned me. That you remarried because you wanted nothing from your broken wife. Do you know what it is to scream into silence, Adrian? to beg for your husband, your son, and never be heard. Adrian buried his face in his hands, shaken like a man whose empire had crumbled under his heart. Across the room, reporters' pens scratched furiously. Scandal. Headlines. Page ones filled with betrayal and buried lies. Then Evelyn steadied herself. Her voice broke, but her words cut sharper than knives. You wonder what caused Julian's endless suffering? The seizures? His fragile form? It was not chance, not fate. It was her. Gasps shot through the chamber. Evelyn wiped her tears and glared at Sienna with all the fire she had left. She poisoned me, slowly, while I carried Julian inside my body. Small doses of toxins slipped into my food, my drinks. She wanted my child to be weak, so he could always be dependent, and then she planned to move me aside and claim the fortune as her own. The entire courtroom erupted into chaos. Lawyers screamed objections. Reporters lunged for photos. The judge's gavel thundered, but order could not silence truth anymore. Adrian stared at Sienna. His voice burned like a wildfire. Is it true? For the first time, cracks appeared in Sienna's mask. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her silence screamed louder than words. Evelyn reached slowly across the stand for her son. Though they were separated by feet, Julian's small hands lifted instinctively, signing toward her. Tears cascaded down everyone's cheeks as Clara translated softly. He said, "Mommy, I knew you'd come back." The court dissolved into sobs. And then, just as the truth weighed heaviest, the doors burst open. Uniformed police officers streamed in. "We have a warrant for search and seizure of the Hayworth estate. Evidence of fraud and conspiracy has been submitted." Adrian's world tilted. The fortune, the empire, the past, it all teetered on the brink. But above riches, one truth stood taller than any skyscraper. Evelyn was alive. Evelyn had returned. The judge banged his gavel one last time. This hearing is adjourned. The truth will be revealed in full trial. But under the thunder of footsteps and flashing cameras, Adrian caught one final glimpse of Sienna's face. Not broken, not destroyed, but calculating. Rage smoldered in her veins. He realized with horror that this was not her downfall. This was only her beginning. If Evelyn's testimony shook you, type "Secrets Uncovered" in the comments. Hit that like button if your hands were trembling during the showdown, and subscribe right now. We leave the courtroom and enter the dark truth of poisoned love. Sienna's crimes run deeper than even Evelyn knows, and her vanishing act will test every ounce of courage the Hayworths have left. Evelyn revealed the painful reality. She was poisoned, imprisoned, silenced. But Sienna isn't finished. Her silence now is sharper than words, a warning that the real war is still coming. The storm that was Evelyn's return hadn't cleared. It had only begun. By dawn the next day, the Hayworth mansion stood cordoned off by flashing police lights. Reporters swarmed the gates. Servants scurried like rats, abandoning a sinking ship. The empire Sienna had clawed her way into was unraveling strand by strand. But Sienna herself had vanished. Adrian watched from his office window as investigators carried boxes of files out of his home. His temples burned from sleepless hours and grief. He could face any collapse in boardrooms, but the collapse of his family? That was war he didn't know how to fight. Nora watched nervously as Evelyn sat with Julian and Clara near the piano. Evelyn's hands shook when she caressed her boy's hair. Years stolen could not be returned. But Julian leaned against her anyway, as if his body remembered what his eyes had forgotten. Clara translated his signs, whispering, "He says he missed your songs, Mommy. He says you smell the same as his dreams." Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. But there was less time for soft reunion than anyone wanted. That same morning, Detective Ramirez arrived with files that curdled Adrian's blood. "Mr. Hayworth, there's something you need to see. We've uncovered evidence from Sienna's personal physician." Inside the folder lay years of records, invoices for chemicals, prescriptions for sedatives never logged, and therapist's notes doctored to confirm Evelyn's unstable state. Adrian's hands shook with fury as he flipped through them. She fabricated everything. She didn't just want to replace Evelyn, she wanted her erased. The detective's voice dropped. It gets worse. Lab results show compounds matching traces in Mrs. Hayworth's bloodstream when she was admitted years ago. Slow-acting toxins. Enough to weaken her. Enough to cause complications in pregnancy. Adrian stared down at Julian, still frail, still more fragile than any child his age. His chest seized. She poisoned them both. Evelyn's voice cracked. I knew it wasn't my body. I knew it wasn't fate. Every sip of tea, every meal she prepared when she helped me, she was feeding me death. And when Julian was born sickly, she smiled. She smiled because she'd won. The room seemed to close in. Walls crowded closer with the stench of betrayal. Clara's small hands fumbled over Julian's, trying to comfort him. But Julian's wide eyes filled with innocence, looked only to Adrian. Silence screamed the question. How could you let this happen? Adrian lowered his head, ashamed. He had been the master of empires, yet blind in his own home. Suddenly the phone rang. Ramirez answered. His face hardened. She's gone. Sienna fled last night. Her car was abandoned near the harbor. No sign of her. Nora muttered. That woman won't run empty-handed. She's planning something. Her words proved true by nightfall. Across the news, financial chaos erupted. Anonymous leaks exposed Adrian's darkest deals. Offshore accounts, compromised contracts, every skeleton from his business closets thrust into the public eye. The Hayworth empire collapsed overnight. Investors fled. Stocks tanked. Sienna, nowhere to be seen, set the world on fire from the shadows. At home, Evelyn clung to Julian, whispering lullabies through broken sobs. Adrian sat motionless at the grand piano, hands hovering over the keys but unable to play. His fortune was ash. But worse, the poison of betrayal still lingered in his son's blood. That night, Clara and Julian snuck out of their rooms together. Clara guided him into the West Wing, curious about the shadows that had held Evelyn prisoner so long. Inside the hollow room, Clara found old scraps of Evelyn's journals hidden under floorboards, pages scrawled with desperate confessions. One line chilled her the most. If Sienna fails to kill me, she will kill him next. The next morning, Clara handed the pages to Evelyn, who collapsed into sobs as her little girl's innocent hands delivered evidence darker than anything yet. The Hayworths now knew one thing. Sienna wasn't running out of fear. She was circling back for revenge. Are you shaking yet? If you believe no poison can kill the truth, write "The Truth Lives" in the comments right now. And hit that like button if Sienna's darkness just crawled under your skin. Subscribe because something is coming. And trust me, it's fire. The Queen of Lies returns, and she doesn't come with whispers. She comes armed. The world knows Sienna is guilty, but evidence points to something worse. This isn't over. As Adrian's fortune crumbles, Sienna resurfaces for vengeance, ready to destroy not just the Hayworth empire, but anyone who stands between her and control. The Hayworth fortune was already slipping like sand through Adrian's fingers. Headlines screamed betrayal. Bankers cut ties overnight. Reporters camped outside Evelyn's safe house begging for interviews. To the rest of the world, the mighty billionaire was just another fallen king. But inside his heart, Adrian realized the greater battle had nothing to do with balance sheets. His empire wasn't skyscrapers. It was Julian. It was Evelyn. And against them both stood a woman who had proven herself a serpent wrapped in diamonds, Sienna. For weeks she vanished like smoke. Every board member assumed she'd fled abroad. Police scrambled. Yet Adrian suspected she was closer than they thought. Poisonous women didn't disappear. They regrouped. And he was right. On Julian's 7th birthday, the first birthday Evelyn had spent with her son after reclaiming her freedom, the family gathered quietly in the garden of Nora's modest home, far from the Hayworth estate. Balloons bobbed against a wooden fence. A humble cake sat on the table. Julian smiled shyly as Clara signed, "Make a wish." It should have been peace. But peace cannot survive when vengeance is unfulfilled. The sound of tires screeching cracked the laughter. A black car swung into the street, stopping hard in front of the little house. Doors slammed, and there she was, Sienna, not dressed in silks this time, not hidden under veils and lies, dressed in black jeans, hair wild, eyes ablaze. In her hand, wrapped in leather, shone the cold metal of a gun. Screams broke out. Evelyn pulled Julian behind her, Clara clinging to Nora's hand. Adrian lunged forward, but Sienna raised her weapon, a smile curving like a knife. "You thought you could steal my place again," she hissed. "All of you, claws in my fortune, claws in my life. But if I can't have this family, no one will." Adrian bellowed, "Sienna, don't. He's just a boy." But madness burned hotter than reason. Her hand shook, not with doubt, but with fury too big for her body to contain. Clara, trembling, whispered in Julian's ear, signing quickly before the moment shattered. Julian's eyes widened with fear, then courage, and he squeezed her hand tightly. "Do you want to know what I've learned in all these years, Adrian?" Sienna snarled. "Money is power, but fear is the chain you never break. Tonight, I deliver both." She cocked the gun. Time froze. Clara stepped forward. The little girl, with knees wobbling but eyes blazing, stood between Julian and Sienna, her small body blocking the line of fire. "If you want him," she shouted bravely, "you'll have to hurt me too." The world stopped breathing. Sienna flinched. For the first time, true hesitation flickered in her eyes. A child dared defy her. For a blink, the diamond-studded woman saw not enemies, not Adrian, not Evelyn, but the tiny mirror of innocence she herself had once been before obsession hollowed her life. The hesitation was enough. Adrian charged forward, knocking Sienna's arm wide. The gun fired. Glass shattered. Guests screamed. Evelyn fell to her knees, holding Julian tight as shards sprayed the ground. Police sirens wailed in the distance. But even as they wrestled, Sienna shrieked like a wounded animal. "I will not lose. This family, this fortune, everything, it should have been mine." Adrian pinned her with a strength born not of rage, but of a father's need to protect. His voice thundered, "You lost the moment you chose hatred over love." Police officers stormed the yard, dragging Sienna away kicking and screaming, her shrill voice echoing promises of revenge even as she disappeared into the flashing lights. The family, bruised, weeping, shaken, huddled in the garden. Julian buried his face into Clara's shoulder, trembling, while Evelyn whispered lullabies through sobs. Nora cried openly, clutching her daughter close, knowing the child had just stared down death itself with fearless love. And Adrian realized redemption wasn't gold, wasn't skyscrapers. Redemption was his family, the one miracle wealth could never build. For the first time in decades, his eyes lifted heavenward, not toward power, but toward gratitude. He held Evelyn's hand against his chest, whispering, "I almost lost everything that ever mattered. But I won't make that mistake again." Yet, even as the sirens faded and Sienna wailed into the night, an unsettling silence lingered inside them all. This was not the final chapter. Not yet. Chaos had been paused, not ended. Because when a woman like Sienna vows revenge, her shadow lingers long after she's been dragged away. If Clara's bravery just broke your heart and rebuilt it in the same breath, type "Love is stronger" in the comments. Smash the like button if your blood raced during this scene, and subscribe, because the grand shattering is coming. Sienna has been dragged away, her gun seized, her empire in ashes. But her vow of vengeance echoes. The family is scarred but clinging together, with one final test waiting. The shattering that will decide once and for all whether love survives, or whether her poison destroys them forever. The sirens had gone. The yard was quiet. Yet silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like the held breath before something final. Julian slept under Evelyn's watchful arms, his chest rising softly for the first time in weeks without sobs shaking his body. Clara curled on Nora's lap, her tiny hands still trembling after standing in the path of danger itself. The family was alive, but shadows still loomed. For even though Sienna had been dragged away kicking, she had spit one promise through clenched teeth as the police dragged her off. This isn't over. Not until one of us is gone. That night, the Hayworths tried to hold on to hope. But fate had one last cruel blow to strike. The crack of shattered glass woke them. Alarm screams followed. In the darkened house, a figure slipped inside. In her desperation, Sienna had escaped custody and returned to finish what she started. Adrian leapt from his bed, racing toward the sound. Evelyn shielded Julian, pulling Clara tight beside her as they huddled in the corner, hearts pounding. Sienna's voice rang through the halls, ragged and wild, stripped of glamour but not of venom. I gave up everything for this family. Everything. And you all chose her. The ghost. You chose the child who isn't even mine. She stormed into the room, eyes bloodshot, weapon gleaming in her shaking hand. If I can't own this empire, then I'll burn it to the ground, starting with him. She raised her weapon toward Julian. Time slowed. Adrian surged forward with a father's roar, but in that split instant, someone else moved faster. Nora, the woman who had entered their lives with nothing but humility and kindness, now threw herself between Sienna and the children. Her body shielded them as Sienna's fingers squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like lightning. The room screamed. Evelyn clutched Julian tighter as Nora collapsed to the ground. Clara screamed, falling beside her mother's trembling figure. For one frozen eternity, the world blurred. Then, Adrian tackled Sienna with a force born of love, rage, and the weight of every betrayal. The gun clattered to the ground. Police sirens surged again, flashing lights dancing across shattered windows. This time, officers burst in before Sienna could rise. They dragged her struggling body from the mansion for the last time, her voice shattering into the night. This was supposed to be mine. Mine. Her venom was gone. The snake was caged. Evelyn turned to Nora, tears blinding her. But by some miracle, the bullet had only grazed her shoulder. She was weak, bleeding, but alive. Clara sobbed, holding her hand as paramedics rushed forward. The family broke into weeping relief. Love, scarred, shaken, shredded by poison and lies, had survived. Weeks later, the mansion doors opened wide again. But this time, there were no glittering banquets, no cold portraits staring over guests. The halls echoed with something new. Laughter. Clara's giggles chasing Julian across marble floors. Evelyn playing soft music at the piano as her son pressed his ear against the keys to feel the vibration of her lullabies. Adrian painting over Evelyn's portrait, not to erase her, but to hang it beside a new family picture where Nora and Clara stood at their side. No longer outsiders, but woven into the family's story forever. The empire Adrian once guarded like treasure was gone. But he found something richer. He rebuilt, not towers of glass, but a family bound with scars and love stronger than poison and greed. One evening, as the sun sank over the estate, Adrian whispered to Evelyn by the balcony, "I thought I lost you. I thought I buried you. But maybe this was the only way I could learn. Power means nothing. You, Julian, this family, that's the only empire I'll fight for now." Evelyn leaned into him, whispering back, "We survived the fire. And sometimes, what survives fire glows brighter than what was unburnt." Below them, Clara signed something silly to Julian that sent him into fits of soundless laughter. Nora smiled at the sight of her daughter finally at peace. Redemption had been born, not in courts, not in money, not in scandal, but in shattered glass and the beginnings that rose after. The Hayworth dynasty no longer belonged to greed. It belonged to love. And that, friends, is the end of this emotional storm. If this story took you on a roller coaster, left you crying, gasping, smiling, and believing again in love over betrayal, slam that like button right now. Comment below with love wins so I know you felt the journey. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because powerful stories like this one are just the beginning. The poison has been purged, betrayal defeated, a family reborn, but etched forever into memory. the night one billionaire learned money was worthless beside the priceless gift of love, forgiveness, and second chances.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.